The Holocaust has left its mark as one of the darkest moments in history. However, even during the darkest of times, there was still love. Here, we tell you about a love story between a Nazi concentration camp prisoner and an SS guard at Auschwitz. In September 1935, the Reichstag, the parliament, during the Third Reich, voted unanimously for the passing of the law for the protection of German blood and German honor, otherwise known as the Nuremberg Laws, that not only excluded German Jews from Reich citizenship, but from marrying or having sexual relations with people of German or related blood. Persons accused of having sexual relations with non-Aryans faced public humiliation, and those convicted were typically sentenced to prison terms, and subsequent to 8 March 1938, upon completing their sentences, were re-arrested by the Gestapo and sent to Nazi concentration camp. Even with the punishments for forbidden affection severe, especially for Nazi soldiers, that was not enough to stop Auschwitz SS officer Franz Wunsch from falling in love with a Jewish Slovakian prisoner named Helena Citro. Across the world, Auschwitz concentration camp has become a symbol of genocide, terror, war, and the Holocaust. However, after 70 years, PBS in America as well as an Israeli television brought to life the forbidden romance story between an SS guard and a Jewish prisoner at Auschwitz that highlighted the complexity of human relationships in the most horrifying of world events. In Auschwitz, a Jewish prisoner and the SS guard charged with murdering her family and friends fall in love. Or not a normal love, but something resembling romance and affection. This is no fiction. In the hellhole of Auschwitz, where more than 1 million people were murdered, 960,000 of them Jews, a Jewish prisoner named Helena Citro and a Nazi SS Lance Corporal named Franz Wunsch developed feelings for one another. Their relationship saved the life of Helena's sister, Rosinka. The brothels form the subject of Das Käse Bordell, the concentration camp brothel, by Robert Sommer, a book that has been hailed as the first comprehensive account of a little-known chapter of Nazi oppression in World War II. Sommer's work explores the origins, structure, and impact of the Sonderbauten special buildings run by Heinrich Himmler's SS in Germany and Nazi-occupied Europe. In the collective memory and written history of World War II, the camp brothels were for a long time taboo, the 35-year-old Berliner says. The former prisoners didn't want to talk about it. It was a difficult subject to handle. It didn't fit so easily into the post-war image of the concentration camps as monuments to suffering. Beginning with the Austrian camp at Mauthausen in 1942, the SS opened 10 brothels, the biggest of which was in Auschwitz, in modern Poland, where as many as 21 women prisoners once worked. The last opened in early 1945, the year the war ended. The chapter is separate from the annals of the Holocaust of European Jews. Jewish women were not recruited as prostitutes, and Jewish men were also not permitted to visit the brothels. Sommer estimates around 200 women inmates in total were forced to work in the brothels, initially offered the prospect of escaping the brutality of the concentration camps. They were promised release after half a year if they served in the brothel, but the promises were never honored. Later, the SS just selected women they felt were suitable. Jews were not allowed in. Neither were Soviet prisoners of war, he added. Jewish women did not serve as sex workers. Tens of thousands of captured soldiers, political prisoners, and people branded socially undesirable by the Nazis, including Roma and homosexuals, were held in camps alongside the millions of Jews who died in the Holocaust. The idea behind the brothels was to raise productivity by providing forced laborers with added incentive, said Sommer. Yet from what I found, it didn't work at all. Only a few people were actually in a physical condition to go to them. According to Sommer, the use of prisoners to provide sex to other prisoners was purely a Nazi phenomenon in the war. The prostitutes, most in their early 20s, received more food and were treated less harshly than other women inmates. In return, they had to provide sex to selected prisoners every evening between 8 and 10 p.m. and on Sunday afternoons. Summer recalls that the brothels show another dimension to the Nazi terror, where victims of the Nazis were made into perpetrators against the women who grew up in communist East Germany. After the war, the women, many of whom had been interned by the Nazis on the grounds they were asocial or antisocial, remained stigmatized despite their ordeal, Summer said. The brothels were strictly regulated, charging a fixed sum. The idea of providing material incentives for prisoners was borrowed from Soviet gulags, where inmates' behavior could determine the size of their food rations. The Nazis even imposed race laws inside the brothels, said Summer. Germans who wanted to go to a brothel could only go to a German woman, and a Slavic prisoner only to a Slavic woman. Only privileged prisoners like Kapos camp supervisors had the means to afford frequent visits, and Summer estimates less than 1% of the camp population ever went to the brothels. Once the SS had issued a brothel permit, men were assigned a woman and medically examined. Even the act of intercourse was supervised, as detailed SS logs of the brothels testify. Edgar Kupfer-Koberwitz, a prisoner at Dachau, described the system in his concentration camp journal. You wait in the hall. An officer records the prisoner's name and number. Then a number is called and the name of the prisoner in question. Then you run to the room with that number. Each visit, it's a different number. You have 15 minutes. Exactly 15 minutes. Privacy was a foreign concept in the concentration camps and the brothels. The doors had spy holes and an SS soldier patrolled the hall. The prisoners had to take off their shoes and were to speak no more than absolutely necessary. Only the missionary position was allowed. Often, it didn't even get as far as intercourse. Some men were no longer physically strong enough, and according to Summer, some had a greater need to talk with a woman again or to feel her presence. The SS was very afraid of the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. The men were given disinfectant ointments in the hospital barracks before and after each brothel visit, and doctors took smear samples from the women to test for gonorrhea and tested their blood for syphilis. Contraception, on the other hand, was one aspect that the SS left up to the women. But pregnancies rarely occurred, since many women had been forcibly sterilized before their arrest, and others had been rendered infertile through their suffering in the camps. In the event of an occupational accident, the SS would simply replace the woman and send her to have an abortion. Those who withstood the hardship of brothel life did have more chance of escaping death in the camps, according to Summer's research. Almost all the women in forced prostitution survived the Nazis' terror regime. It is largely unknown what became of them or whether they were ever able to recover from their traumatic experience. Most of them remained silent about their fate for the rest of their lives. However, nearly all the women forced to work there are now dead, and those that remain are reluctant to talk. We don't know of any who were compensated for what they went through, Summer said. It's important that these women are given back some of their dignity. If you ever visit Auschwitz I or view a wide-lens photo of the infamous Arbeit macht frei Gate, the first building on the immediate left of the entrance was the Auschwitz brothel. Interestingly, not included in the guide's narration, or indeed even mentioned. As the girls stepped off the transport at Auschwitz, a sinking realization settled upon them like a heavy shroud. They had been deceived, lured into a nightmare they couldn't have fathomed. Among them was Edith Grossman, a survivor who vividly recalled those harrowing moments. We were teenagers, she reflected, her voice heavy with the weight of memory. Only a month ago, we were giggling and gossiping about the trivialities of our community, but now... Her words trailed off, replaced by a haunted silence. In the grim reality of Auschwitz, where death loomed at every corner, the innocence of youth seemed a cruel mockery. We were still young enough, Edith continued, her tone tinged with bitterness, to want to throw temper tantrums, to be lazy, to shirk a duty, or to sleep late. Yet amidst the horror, there was a stark recognition of their mortality. We were seeing girls dying, Edith recounted, her voice trembling with the rawness of the memory, already dead before their time. The specter of death hovered over them, casting a chilling shadow on their uncertain futures. In the face of such brutality, the question echoed in their minds like a relentless drumbeat. Will that be me too? Will I be dead soon, too? It was a question that gnawed at their souls, a haunting uncertainty that stalked their every waking moment in Auschwitz's unforgiving grasp. One of the terrified Jewish women in that group was Helena Citro, a 20-year-old daughter of a cantor in Slovakia. After she arrived in Auschwitz, Helena was used as slave labor. Her first job was helping demolish a ruined building at the camp. Guards forced the girls to stay at the job site even when parts of the building they were demolishing fell down. We weren't allowed to run, so when the wall came down, the first girls were crushed and died on the spot, she later described. Later on, Helena got a job that was prized by the prisoners, the easier work of sorting the belongings of murdered Jews in an enormous warehouse, which the prisoners nicknamed Canada. On her first day working in the warehouse, Helena was ordered to perform yet another task. The day, March 21, 1942, was the birthday of Franz Wunsch, one of the SS guards in charge of the gas chambers at Auschwitz. Helena was asked to sing for him at his birthday party. If she made a good impression, Helena was told, she might get to stay in the warehouse work detail. Helena decided to do all she could to make a good impression. At age 20, Wunsch was already a hardened Nazi. He'd volunteered for the ruthless SS when he was a teenager. At Auschwitz, he was responsible for unimaginable brutality. Years after the war, he stood trial in his native Austria, charged with shooting and murdering Jewish prisoners, especially members of the Sonderkommando, the Jewish concentration camp laborers who were compelled to force Jews into the gas chambers, remove their bodies once they'd been killed, burn the bodies in Auschwitz's huge crematorium, and dump the ashes into a river. Wunsch was also accused of personally inserting the canisters of poison gas into the chambers in which Jews were killed. At his birthday party that day in Auschwitz, Wunsch watched as Helena sang birthday songs, tears streaming down her cheeks. She later recalled that she was sure she was soon going to die and sang with passion as she believed it might be the last time she ever got to sing. She only knew a few German songs, including the melancholy song Love It Was Not, which lends the new documentary about Helena and Wunsch its title. Watching her sing, Wunsch longed to connect with Helena. He asked her to please sing the song again. His request startled the terrified Jewish prisoner. Suddenly I hear the voice of a human being, Helena later recalled, not the roar of animals. I heard the word, please. I look up with tears in my eyes and see a uniform and I think, God, where are the eyes of a murderer? These are the eyes of a human being. As a young child, Helena was able to move about while avoiding unwanted attention more freely than the elder Helena. She would play near the ghetto fence, secretly waiting for the opportunity to pass a letter containing instructions for Max's brother. Working in this way, the girls were able to rescue the couple. Later, they assisted several more escapees, and it was not long before the apartment proved to be too small and too dangerous a place for all of them to stay. Helena found and rented a small house, located at 3 Tatarska Street, about half a mile from their previous residence. The house had no electricity or running water, but it did have a good-sized attic. Under cover of night, Helena scuttled Max and the others to the new residence. Max built a false wall in the attic using scrap wood that Helena had salvaged from bombed-out buildings. Unfortunately, there was no time to do anything about the rats that also called the attic home. One afternoon, as Helena prepared to pass a letter near the fence, a bystander alerted Nazi guard. The guard ordered her to stop. The act of passing such a note was punishable by death, even for a child. Moreover, the note, still in her hand, read Tatarska 3. the address of the house that was already sheltering close to a dozen Jews, all of whom would surely perish if she were captured. Helena ran. The SS guard's footsteps thundered behind her as young Helena sprinted through the narrow alleyways of the camp. With every stride, fear clutched at her heart, urging her to run faster, to flee the impending danger. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. In a desperate bid to evade capture, Helena's flight came to an abrupt halt as the guard's iron grip closed around her. A violent struggle erupted, the sounds of blows and cries echoing in the cold air. Despite her tender years, Helena fought with a ferocity born of sheer survival instinct. Years later, in a somber interview, Helena recounted the harrowing encounter with a mixture of defiance and disbelief. "I have no idea how it happened," she admitted, her voice trembling with the weight of memory. "I defended myself, but I was just a child." In a moment of primal instinct, Helena's desperation took a feral turn. "So I bit him in the leg," she recalled, her words tinged with a surreal disbelief. The guard's agonized cry pierced the air as Helena's teeth sank into flesh, a desperate act of defiance in the face of overwhelming brutality. "And I must have bitten him hard," Helena continued, her voice faltering, "because he let go of me and grabbed his leg. In that fleeting moment of reprieve, she seized the opportunity to flee, her heart pounding in her chest as she raced towards the sanctuary of her home. But even in her moment of escape, fear gripped Helena's soul like a vice. With trembling hands, she clutched the note, a damning reminder of the perilous game she was forced to play. In a desperate bid to conceal the evidence, she swallowed it whole, the bitter taste of fear lingering on her tongue. "I was in a terrible shock," Helena admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But what could I do? It was a narrow escape, a fleeting moment of victory in a world where survival hung by the slenderest of threads." And as she wept in the safety of her home, Helena knew that the specter of the SS guard would forever haunt her dreams. Several months later, 13 Jews ranging in age from 10 to 50 were living in the Podgorska's small attic. It was terribly cold in the winter and oppressively hot in the summer. Their bathroom was a bucket that had to be emptied daily into the outhouse. They relied on the girls to feed them. Bathing was a challenge. They had to be fed. They had no medical care. They could not leave. If the girls were to continue to support everyone, they would need income. But even the elder Helena was still too young, legally, to work. With the help of a friend, she obtained false papers, which allowed her to get a job making screws and bolts at a local manufacturing plant, and earn the money needed for food and supplies. For her part, 8-year-old Helena continued to carry out the laborious and dangerous tasks needed to help them all survive. She carried water from the well, emptied the bucket in the outhouse, and shopped discreetly for food at open-air markets. One day, an SS officer knocked on the door. He demanded that all occupants vacate the home immediately, explaining that the Nazis had commandeered a municipal building across the street from Tatarska 3, converted it into a military hospital, and would need the house to provide lodging for hospital staff. The girls were warned that they had 2 hours to leave, after which time they would be shot. Panic ensued. The 13 Jews, who had now been hidden in the attic for many months, begged the girls to flee, crying out that they had done enough and should save themselves. But the girls refused to leave. At the end of 2 hours, there was a knock on the door. This time, it was a different SS guard. Casually, he informed the girls it was good they had not moved out. He said they would not need the entire house after all, only one room. Only hours later, 2 German nurses moved into the small bedroom directly below the attic where the 13 Jews were hiding. This living situation went on for several months. The nurses' schedule varied, and it was impossible to predict when they would come and go. They frequently hosted the Nazi soldiers they dated for overnight stays. One night, The nurses complained of noises in the attic and sent one of the soldiers up to investigate. From the kitchen table, the sisters watched in terror, helpless, as he climbed the ladder. It seemed that all would soon be lost. And then the soldier climbed back down. "Rats," he explained. "Filthy Poles." On July 23, 1944, Soviet planes bombed Nazi targets in Auschwitz. 4 days later, on the second anniversary of the Nazis' first major deportation of Jews to the Belzec death camp, the Russians captured the city. By the time the Nazis were pushed out, only 300 of the approximately 16,000 Jews who had lived in the Auschwitz area had survived the war. The Soviets went door to door as they secured the city, and it was not long before a Soviet soldier burst through the door of Tatarska 3. Helena asked the soldier if the Nazis were gone. He said yes. At that moment, the hungry, terrified, and traumatized group that had been hidden in the attic for nearly 2 years cautiously came down the stairs. Startled, the Soviet soldier raised his rifle. Helena shouted that the group was not a threat, explaining that they were Jews hiding from the Nazis. The soldier revealed that he was a Jew too. Helena returned to work in the Canada warehouse, sorting the possessions of murdered Jews, and Wunsch visited her later on, tossing her a letter he'd written. When he came into the barracks where I was working, he threw me that note. I destroyed it right there and then, but I did see the word love. "I fell in love with you," Helena recalled years later from her home in Israel. "I thought I'd rather be dead than be involved with an SS man. For a long time afterwards, there was just hatred. I couldn't even look at him," she described. Wunsch continued to pursue Helena, hopelessly besotted by her. His affection didn't extend to helping her escape, but he did smuggle her extra food and clothing beyond the starvation rations and thin prison uniforms that contributed to Auschwitz, prisoners' torment and deaths. Helena later described that helping her in this way put Wunsch's life at risk with his superiors in the SS. He gave her extra sheets and blankets and turned over his own food rations to her, even giving Helena the gifts of food that his mother sent him. "He loved me to the point of madness," Helena later described. She shared the food Wunsch gave her with other inmates, thus aiding in saving their lives. At times, Helena appealed to Wunsch to help spare the lives of her fellow inmates. On occasion, she even intervened personally, grabbing his hand while he was beating a Jew, imploring him to stop. Some of her fellow prisoners were grateful, but many others were intensely jealous of the gifts and safety being lavished on Helena while they faced death every day. Everyone was jealous, deeply, of the very fact that she had that chance, and we would go like sheep to the slaughter, one of Helena's fellow Auschwitz inmates describes in the documentary. A turning point came when Wunsch was able to help Helena's sister. Her sister Rosinka and her 2 young children, a 9-year-old girl and newborn baby boy, arrived in Auschwitz and had been selected for death to be sent to the gas chambers immediately. Hearing the news, Helena ran to the gas chamber and first pleaded with the SS guards to spare their lives. When they refused, Helena begged them to kill her too. The guards were about to comply when Wunsch ran up and began to violently beat Helena for the crime of violating curfew. While he beat her, he secretly whispered to her to tell him her sister's name. "So he said to me, 'Tell me quickly what your sister's name is before I'm too late,'" Helena later recounted. "So I said, 'You won't be able to.' She came with 2 little children. He replied, 'Children? That's different. Children can't live here.' So he hurried to the crematorium and located my sister." Helena's sister survived, although the children were murdered. It's impossible for us to look back at this period and fully understand what a prisoner like Helena was going through. With her family and friends and fellow Jews being murdered around her night and day for years after watching her precious little niece and nephew killed in front of her, any kindness or help must have seemed overwhelming. As time unfolded amidst the shadows of Auschwitz, It appeared that Helena began to harbor a glimmer of affection in her heart for Wunsch. Throughout her life, those who knew Helena well emphasized that their relationship never ventured into physical intimacy. Such an expression of love would have been an impossibility within the confines of the tightly regulated and monitored environment of the concentration camp. However, Wunsch's numerous acts of kindness and generosity towards Helena spoke volumes, a silent symphony of compassion amid the cacophony of suffering. His gifts and favors, bestowed upon her with unwavering devotion, stood as tangible tokens of his affection, visible to all who bore witness to their silent exchange amidst the desolation of Auschwitz. Before her passing in 2005, Helena confided in British filmmaker Lawrence Rees, reflecting on her extraordinary bond with Wunsch. "Here, he did something remarkable," she shared. "There were fleeting moments where I forgot the confines of my identity as a Jew and the distinctions that set us apart. And truthfully, in the end, I found love for him." In those profound moments of connection amidst the horrors of Auschwitz, their souls transcended the barriers of religion and circumstance, forging a bond that defied the constraints of their reality. Wunsch took a photograph of Helena clad in her striped prisoner's uniform, a poignant emblem of the harrowing reality they endured within the confines of Auschwitz. Yet, amidst the desolation, Helena's radiant smile illuminated the frame, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit even in the face of unimaginable suffering. It was a jarring juxtaposition, the backdrop of Auschwitz's horrors against Helena's semblance of happiness and vitality. According to his daughter Dagmar, Wunsch became fixated on this photograph, its significance transcending mere sentimentality. He painstakingly reproduced it, creating multiple copies, each one a tangible fragment of his unwavering devotion to Helena. In a desperate bid to defy the grim reality of their circumstances, he meticulously cut out Helena's face, delicately superimposing it onto other photographs. In these altered images, Helena appeared to inhabit a world untouched by the horrors of Auschwitz, a bittersweet illusion crafted by Wunsch's enduring love and longing for her safety and well-being. After the war's end, Helena and her sister Rosinka embarked on a journey back to their homeland in Slovakia, their hearts heavy with the weight of their shared trauma and the remnants of their shattered lives. In a poignant gesture of farewell, Wunsch bestowed upon them warm, fur-lined boots, a final act of kindness to ease their passage into an uncertain future. Their return, however, was met with devastation as they discovered the remnants of their once vibrant Jewish community reduced to rubble and ashes. Amidst the ruins of their former lives, they found solace in their shared resilience and determination to rebuild amidst the wreckage. Meanwhile, Wunsch tirelessly sought out Helena in the aftermath of the war, his letters a lifeline of hope in the midst of despair. "Then we will be together and keep the many promises we made each other," he wrote, his words a testament to the enduring flame of their love that transcended the ravages of time and war. In his musings, he pondered the stark contrast of their reality, contemplating how vastly different their lives would have been had the tides of war turned in their favor. Helena chose to distance herself from Wunsch's persistent letters, opting to carve out a new life for herself in the wake of liberation. Within a year of escaping the horrors of Auschwitz, she entered into marriage with a Zionist activist, embarking on a journey to Israel to build a future filled with hope and resilience. However, the specter of Wunsch's past deeds haunted him, even as he attempted to forge a new path for himself. A relative of Helena intervened, sternly demanding that he cease all correspondence with her. The impassioned letter condemned Wunsch for his complicity in the deaths of Helena's beloved niece and nephew, asserting that their innocent blood would forever stain his conscience. Returning to Austria, Wunsch sought solace in domesticity, establishing a family of his own. Yet, The shadows of his wartime atrocities loomed large over him. In 1972, he faced trial for his crimes against humanity. The courtroom, a stark reminder of the indelible scars left by his sadistic actions. Witnesses recounted tales of his brutality, painting a chilling portrait of a man consumed by cruelty. Wunsch's hands, once stained with the blood of innocents, now faced the judgment of justice as the horrors of his past were laid bare for all to see. Wunsch's enduring affection for Helena was no secret within the family he built after the war. His wife, grappling with their shared past, reached out to Helena, begging for her forgiveness and support. In a surprising move, Helena agreed, traveling to Vienna to testify on Wunsch's behalf. In court, Helena painted a complex picture of Wunsch, recounting moments of kindness alongside acts of brutality. Despite her testimony, the judge ruled in Wunsch's favor, citing legal limitations on war crimes prosecution in Austria at the time. It was a bittersweet outcome, showing the complexities of forgiveness and justice in the aftermath of unspeakable horrors. Helena returned home to Israel, the fleeting friendship and romance she'd once shared with Wunsch long dead. She never got over the trauma of her experiences during the Holocaust. Her 3 children described the difficulties Helena always had as a result. She was often very angry and sometimes profoundly unhappy. Following his trial, Wunsch stood firm in his conviction that his infatuation with Helena had wrought a profound transformation within him. With a voice heavy with remorse and longing, he declared, "Desire changed my brutal behavior. I fell in love with Helena Citro, and that changed me. I became another person entirely because of her influence." In those poignant words, Wunsch acknowledged the transformative power of love, recognizing the seismic shift it had wrought upon the landscape of his soul. Helena's presence had acted as a catalyst for change, softening the hardened edges of his once calloused heart and illuminating a path towards redemption amidst the darkness of his past. Though the scars of his actions lingered, Wunsch found solace in the belief that his love for Helena had sparked a metamorphosis within him, paving the way for a newfound semblance of humanity to emerge from the ashes of his former self. In her, he had found not only solace, but also the catalyst for his own redemption, a beacon of hope amidst the wreckage of his past transgressions. Years ago, in the hell that was Auschwitz, Helena every means she could to live and to help her beloved sister and fellow inmates. It wasn't easy, and it's impossible for us to grasp what she went through and judge the personal choices she made. Helena was determined to survive, and the family she built in Israel today is testament to her strength and resilience.